Hey everybody! We are going to move on to the rules of composition. We focused a lot on how to use the camera, and now we're going to focus a little bit more on what makes a good picture, how to organize the stuff that's in the shot. So one quick way to get into this is take a look at this video of 9 composition tips featuring the work of Steve McCurry, a photojournalist who shot a lot of stuff in India and the Middle East and stuff. His stuff is great. I've got a great big book of his prints in my classroom. Love it. You'll check it out. It's only like 4 or 5 minutes. It's a time well spent. So what is composition? It's the placement or arrangement of visual elements or ingredients in a work of art. And we're gonna look at 7 rules of composition today. Now, when you're making a piece of art, like you're painting or you're sculpting, you have complete control over composition, right? Because you're making it. You're like, I'm gonna paint this in this corner, and I'm gonna put this down here, and I'm gonna sculpt this arm sticking up, and like everything you have control over. Photography, sometimes you have that control as well. If you're shooting in a studio with models or a still life or something like that, when you're doing the Toy Story project, you have pretty much full control over that. You put everything where you want it. Other times, if you're shooting nature stuff, landscapes, action, things where you don't have control, you still have control over what you show with the camera. So it's more like your image management, I think is what Ansel Adams would have called that, where you're saying, okay, well, there's this distracting element over there. I'm just gonna make sure I don't put that in my frame. And how do I find a way to line it up so everything has kind of balance and works well? So let's take a look at what some of those rules are and how you can apply them as a photographer. All right, first one is simplicity, keeping it simple. We are gonna do a little bit of an interactive video here. So if you're in one of my classes, it'll be an Ed puzzle, and it'll stop right here and ask you to pick which picture, A or B, is the picture with a simpler background, and A is the first one and B is the second one. If you're just watching on YouTube, just pause it for a second, pick your picture, and then we'll talk. Okay, yeah, B, the second one. That's my choice, right? There's a saguaro cactus and there's blue sky. It doesn't get much simpler than that, right? The other one's got that, it's got the cactus, it's got whatever that other thing is. Is that a yucca tree? I don't know, I don't speak desert very well. And then there's like a telephone, if you still remember those payphones, and then I don't know, some aloe or something down there, some other kind of thing. Like, there's a lot of stuff in that picture. Keep it simple. Sometimes you just crank that zoom ring and you're good to go. Try it again. Take a look at these. The first picture, which do you think is less distracting between those 2 on the top left? Yeah, the second one, right? The church is the dominant focus, and there's just some elements in the foreground, the little cactusy things and stuff, but it's all about the church. The first picture there, we've got these old cars in the parking lot. I don't know, like, what do they have to do with the picture? They're confusing. It's almost like 2 photos that are split in 2. Take a look at the seagull pictures. Which do you think is less distracting there? The second one again, right? I mean, it's like the previous slide. He's on a blue sky. It's very simple. We know exactly what it is we're looking at. What about these ones? Give me a sentence response. Is this a simple picture or is it chaotic? Why or why not? Why or why not? I think it's not chaotic. I don't know if I'd call it simple, but it's got clear structure, right? We got lines of shoes, and it's just shoes. So in that sense, it is simple because it's one thing. It's lots of one thing, but there is organization, there's order to it. And a lot of times I feel like photography is trying to find little moments of order in a world that is not essentially ordered by nature. So this is a cool kind of moment. It's lots of colors and stuff, but it's got very clear patterns and lines. Okay, next rule, mergers. Don't do it. Or at least don't do it by accident. So what we're looking at is when an important part of the photo or subject is cut off by the edge of the photograph, or when objects in the foreground and background meet at extremely distracting points. So in the first image here, that's a merger problem, right? Because it looks like he's got horns sprouting out of his head. And the second one, we just bring the camera around a little bit, and then it's not sprouting from his head like he's like a reindeer. You know, it's clearer. What's wrong with these pictures? Give me a little bit. Give me a sentence or so. Okay, so if you look at the cheetahs, it almost looks like a two-headed cheetah, or like the cheetahs. There's not enough light coming from the side or something to separate the two, so they're like merging together, and it's this weird like monster cheetah. This dude with the water spraying out of the top of his head, it looks like his brain sprung a leak. And then this one is his face is cut off, so this is just a garbage composition in the first place, right? But all those are merger issues, like it's being cut off by the frame, his hand is being cut off there, we don't know where the rest of the hand is. Those are things to pay attention to. Which is better? The second one, right? The second one's better because it doesn't look like there's a tree growing out of his head. His head's not a flower pot, so it's a clearer composition. 70s style notwithstanding. Framing, next idea. So what you choose to include in your frame should always add to your image, not take away from it or distract. And that's what we were talking about at the beginning with that image management. What do you show? What do you not show? So photography is a subtractive art. There's all this stuff, and you're saying, I'm only going to show this part, the stuff that matters. You can also use naturally occurring frames like doors and windows, tree branches, caves, any of that kind of stuff to sort of draw attention to something and create sort of a vignette or a framing sort of element there. It can be pretty similar to mergers, like what are you cutting out? So if you look at these two pictures, the first one is a little bit more focused, right? It's clearly focused on the little girl who's crabby about something, and you see the relationship, and there's a story there. The second one, when it zooms out a little bit, also includes the school bus. To my mind, the second one is the better picture because we know why she's crabby now. And there's just the two elements. There's the girl and her mom, and then there's the school bus. She doesn't want to go to school. She's scared. It's her first day of kindergarten or whatever it is. So that's controlling the frame. What do you show? What do you not show? What about this? Framing or mergers? What are we looking at here? I think it's kind of both. Honestly, like if you look at that, I think it's the wicket is the thing that you hit the croquet balls through, right? It's also an Ewok, but in this case, the littler guy, the guy farther away in the background, he's framed in that little wicket, which is a very nice element. On the other hand, you got his brother or his friend who's cut in half, cut off by the shoulders, and also intersected by the wicket, if that's what it's called. So it's kind of both. There's some cool framing going on, but it's also not paying attention to everything that's going on in the image. So gotta keep it all in your brain. All right, another rule, the rule of thirds. It's more of a guideline than a code, but it's a really good starting place for thinking about how your frame is broken down. The basic idea is that you place your subject at an intersection point of one of these imaginary lines. So if you imagine that your frame is broken into thirds going left to right, there's 1, 2, 3, and then also top to bottom, 1, 2, 3. You find one of those corner sections, like the pear here is right on an intersection point, and that's going to give you a certain kind of dynamic sort of sense of your composition. So do me a favor. Yeah, you're not going to really be able to draw on this unless we're doing an actual pear deck. I'll see if I can do that in an Edpuzzle, but imagine it in your head that there's that same grid across the picture with the tractor. Do you see how the tractor is sitting on one of those intersection points? That's using the rule of thirds. If you can, I had originally planned to do this when I was actually in class. If you can, draw a grid of thirds over this shot. So there's a sample grid on the ladybug, just in case you need a reminder of that. But then also imagine that grid of thirds across the one with the rock, split across there. And you'll see that the rock is on one of those intersection points. And then the trail of the rock goes off and hits one of the other intersection points and brings your eye through the composition. Look at this guy, rule of thirds. He's in the restaurant, he's on the left third, and then you see the rest of the diner on the right third, going in, and there's one person kind of in the middle box kind of looking, and then we've got the rest of the context there. Nice. Here's another rule, leading lines. Natural lines in the photo that lead the viewer's eye to the subject. Where do those lines lead you? Kind of like when we saw the rock thing, right? With that trail, that's kind of a leading line that brings you into the rock and away into the distance. Look at these guys. What is the subject? And what are the leading lines that bring you close to that subject? Yeah, right? In the first picture, the subject is the windmill, and then the rows of poppies, I guess, those are all converging at the windmill, and they bring your eye right to that. And then this little girl's at the post office, the lines of the post office boxes bring you right to her. Cool use of compositional technique. In these, they're still leading lines. They're not as obvious, but they are definitely there. So if we're doing a Pear Deck, you would get to trace that. But just in your mind, take a second and look at these and see how those lines go through. They bring you right into the image and the circles and stuff. And then all these kind of lines of the hills that drag you all over the image and show you, they sort of bring your eye to elements that you want to look at, and they lead you through the picture. All right, so balance. Elements of images have weight. Sometimes a small thing has more weight because it's really bright and it grabs your eye. Sometimes it has weight because it's big. Sometimes it has weight because it's just a strong contrast. Generally, you want to balance that weight. So look at these two photos. Which one seems more balanced to you? It is paying more attention to the weight. To my eye, this first one, because you've got the wheel in one corner, and then almost in a mirror kind of sense is the little girl sitting on there. Whereas this one's got some of the wheel here, some of the wheel here, and then some of her there. Like rule of thirds wise, she's nice in this one because she's just kind of on one of those intersect points, but it's not as balanced. So look at some of these shapes. Like with this, you've got that kind of triangle shape that goes in with the with their reflections. That's nice that it's balanced out the weight from them with then also their reflections and stuff. This one doesn't have that as much. The flamingo sticks up on one side and then the rest of it is kind of dead. Whereas this one, the flamingo curves around and it uses the frame in a graceful kind of gentle way. Trace the shapes in the image if you're doing a Pear Deck. You can see like boom, boom, boom. We've got a little triangle there. We've got this shape here. Sometimes if you kind of let your eyes blur out, so you're not looking at what it is, you're looking at what it looks like let your eyes kind of defocus, and then you'll see the shapes in a way that you wouldn't normally see them. All right, final rule. Fill the frame. Get close. When in doubt, just get the one thing. It's easier to make a pleasing composition with a telephoto lens than with a wide angle lens because a telephoto lens is going to limit what you're seeing every time. And then make the subject the main focus of your image. Think about your subject is first, then think about how to compose that subject to show what it is that you care about with that subject. Okay, next is going to be your turn. So let's take a look at what the assignment actually looks like. Okay, let's look at what you need to do for this assignment. Let's take a look. So this right here is the Shooting the Rules of Composition. It's your turn. This is the portfolio slideshow that you put your own work into. So taking a look at it, there are the directions. You need 3 photos that demonstrate simplicity, 3 that demonstrate horrible mergers, 3 that demonstrate framing, using unnatural frames, doorways, tunnels, archways to frame the subject. 3 that use the rule of thirds, 3 that use leading lines, 3 that demonstrate balance, 3 that demonstrate filling the frame. A lot of your pictures are going to have a lot of these different elements in them because rarely you get a picture that's just one thing. But each one should very clearly show that element that's going into it. So what you're going to need to do is create a Google Drive folder called Rules of Composition and share it with me. Import your photos to that folder. Rename each image to reflect its purpose. So like Simplicity 1, Simplicity 2, Simplicity 3, Framing 1, Framing 2, Framing 3, etc. You're going to link that folder to this slideshow, and you're going to add the photos to the appropriate slides. That way I can see them exactly the way you put them together. Include the link to the Google Drive folder, which is shared with me and contains your full-size copies of all your pictures. As I just said, just because it's got one rule doesn't mean it doesn't have any of the other rules. If at some point you're actually back in school doing this and you're wandering around the halls, be respectful. Don't bother anybody else in class. Picture taking is usually pretty quiet. And be creative. Here's where you add your folder link. So let me show you how to do that. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And if you select this text, hit Insert, Link, then you just find the link for the folder that you made. So over here, I've got a sample assignment, and here's my folder that I made called Rules of Composition. Inside are all the pictures that I shot. Bad mergers, balance. I did more than 3 sometimes, and then I would pick the ones that I wanted the most. Filling the frame, framing, all that kind of stuff. If I do a 2-finger click on Rules of Composition, I get sharing. And then you can either add me to that list, or if you go down to here, you can say anybody with the link can view it, which might be easier. It's up to you, it depends on how public you want it to be. So going back here, once we're in the folder, we copy the link. I'm gonna hit Command-C. You can hit Edit, Copy, that works too. You go into where it says the link thing is, and you post right there. And now it's got a little underline thing, so when I just click on it, it goes right there. Okay. So then here, we've got all these slides, Simplicity 1, Simplicity 2, 3, Horrible Mergers, and you just insert those pictures. So we'll do one together. I don't need to show how to do it with all. Insert image from Drive. If I go to My Drive, sometimes it's easier if you switch it so you're looking at just the words. Actually, let's go to Recent. Simplicity 1. Here's a simple JPEG. You would slap that in right like that. That's all there is to it. Here, let me show you what a finished portfolio should look like. Here's a sample. So here's what it would look like if I did it. There's the directions we just read through. There's the link that would take you right to the folder. And then here's my first one, Simplicity 1, Simplicity 2, Simplicity 3. Some bad mergers. I got a flag growing out of my head and a head tree growing out of my head, a parrot growing out of my head. Framing, I framed the lines inside the reflection of the apple on the back of an iMac. I thought that was kind of cool. There's a sea lion hiding in some rocks, and I've got the rocks all surrounding him for framing. There's my daughter framed in a circle. Rule of thirds. Rule of thirds, rule of thirds. Here's some leading lines leading you off to the mountains. Leading lines of the dock, leading lines of the bricks. Balance with the rock and its reflection. Balance in terms of like the size of the elements. You've got this one major element, then this triangle, then this square. It's like very clear kind of shapes leading you through there. Balance with the shape of these rocks kind of echoed in the shape of the mountain in the background. Filling the frame. Zooming in on a wiener dog face, zooming in on a flower, zooming in on some bear paws. And that was it. That was my 21 pictures. Once you got that turned in, you are good to go. All right, rock it out. I look forward to seeing what you do.